So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session on punctuating dialogue within a sentence when it has been split. Okay, so before we look at the actual split dialogue or split speech, I'm just quickly going to recap on the basic rules of punctuating speech because you need to know those to be able to punctuate the dialogue if it is split in a sentence. Okay, so the basic rules for punctuating dialogue. So when you have the bit that someone is saying, you are going to put what we call inverted commas, okay? And they look like a floating 66 and a 99 around it. And sometimes at school, you will call these bits speech marks, but for today, we're using kind of the grammatical terminology. We are going to call them inverted commas. So when I mention inverted commas, those are what we are speaking about. And when we punctuate the dialogue where only one bit of speech is included within the sentence, you would have a capital letter at the beginning of it. And at the end of it, you would choose either a comma, a question mark, an exclamation mark, or a full stop. And it will depend on what the dialogue is saying and also whereabouts in the sentence it is will help you decide which of those speech marks you use, which of those bits of punctuation. And that bit of punctuation is going inside the inverted commas. So you would have the question, you would have, if it was a question mark, and then you would have the inverted commas after the bit of speech, okay? And don't make the mistake of having a question mark and then putting a full stop afterwards. You don't need any extra punctuation outside of those inverted commas, okay? And then the final bit that I'm hoping you will already be familiar with is that you need what we call a reporting clause with the dialogue. And the reporting clause is basically showing who is speaking. So it might say, said mum, asked dad, screamed Bob. So you've got all of those different words instead of said that show that someone is speaking. But you might also have wondered or thought because it shows that they're kind of speaking inside their head. And then the final rule, if you have a story and you've got a couple of characters within the story, you would need a separate line when a new person starts speaking. And I always remember a little rhyme that was taught to me when I was at school that goes 66, 99, new speaker, new line. And it just helps me remember that each time someone different starts speaking, you need a separate line for that person. Okay. Now, just so that you can see what we've spoken about, we have got here an example, and I've got this bit at the end here, Mr. James screamed, or Mr. James screamed at the beginning. That part there is what we call the reporting clause, okay? Because that is who is speaking. The bit inside the inverted commas, you can't go in there. That is what is being spoken. Okay. And notice that both times we've written this, the U begins with a capital letter because it is the first word that is spoken. And then because he is screaming it, I've put the exclamation mark at the end, and then we have the inverted commas around what is being spoken. Okay, so that's just a very brief recap for those of you that maybe weren't sure on how to punctuate if one person is speaking. Now, what we're looking at today is what we call either split speech or split dialogue. And what that means is if you have the reporting clause in the middle of what is being spoken, okay? So if we have something like, Sarah yelled, Dad, don't do that. We've got the reporting clause in the middle, and there are two different rules that we need to use to decide how to punctuate it, okay? So the first part, if the reporting clause, so this bit here, the thought the wicked witch is the reporting clause, if the reporting clause is in the middle of a sentence, so we need to look at what is being spoken to decide that. So I need an eyeball to complete the spell. So that is a complete sentence. The reporting clause is in the middle of it. So because it is in the middle, what we need to do is we need to have a comma at the end of the first part of the dialogue, a comma after the reporting clause, and notice the big difference here is at the beginning of the second bit of speech, we don't have a capital letter because the reporting clause has kind of interrupted the sentence. So you don't need a capital again. The same as this next one. So let's have a look, see if we can work out where is the reporting clause. The reporting clause, you stay here, said Mum, while we go inside. So this bit here, said Mum, that is showing who is speaking. So let's have a look at what is being spoken. You stay here while we go inside. Now, while we go inside is a subordinate clause, so it doesn't make sense on its own. So it must be part of my main clause. So my main clause, you stay here, it ends with a comma at the end of it. And then after Mum, we have the comma. And then while we go inside, it doesn't need the capital letter because it is the subordinate clause at the end, okay? And one tip for spotting if it is a complete sentence that has been interrupted by the reporting clause is look to see, is one of the bits of dialogue a subordinate clause, because that will help you to work out if it needs a capital letter or not. Okay, so that's the first rule. The second rule comes when you have two separate sentences. So if we look here and we have our reporting clause, Mum asked. So when we look at what is actually being spoken, we can see, do you want any sweets? That is one complete sentence, okay? And it ends with a question mark to show that that is the end of the question. So because it is two separate sentences, I'm going to the shops is separate from do you want any sweets? What we need to do, punctuation wise, we need to have not a comma after the reporting clause, but we need a full stop after that reporting clause. And we need, it's here anyway because I'm using a pronoun, but this part here is going to be a capital letter because it is two separate sentences. Okay, so let's have a look and see how we can use that within some of the sentences, see if we can work it out. So the first thing I'm going to do, I am going to look for where is my reporting clause? So it's over there, remarked Max, next to the book. So I need to think, who is speaking? Well, Max is remarking, so that is another word for said. So this part here, remarked Max, that is my reporting clause, okay? So I now need to look at the bit that is being spoken. So it's over there next to the book. And I need to decide, is that a complete sentence or is it two separate sentences? Now, looking at that, next to the book, it is a prepositional phrase that is showing where the book is or where the object is. It's next to the book. So that bit, it doesn't make sense on its own. So what we need to do when we punctuate this, we need to put our inverted commas before it's, and we need a capital I. So it's over there, and then I need a comma, and then I need my second inverted commas. And now, because next to the book isn't a complete sentence on its own, I need a comma after Max, and the next, it doesn't need a capital letter because it's still part of the original sentence. And then I need my inverted commas at the beginning and after the full stop at the end. Okay. Now, the next one, I've got, sit down, your dad, I'm trying to listen to the news. So it is dad that is doing the speaking, or should I say yelling. So he is saying, sit down, I am trying to listen to the news. So what he is saying is two separate sentences. I've got one bit that he is saying, sit down, and then the second sentence, he's explaining why I'm trying to listen to the news. So when we punctuate this, what we need to do is we need to punctuate it as two separate sentences. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my inverted commas and the capital S. And because he is yelling it, I'm going to have an exclamation mark to show that he is quite annoyed. So sit down, exclamation mark, and then my inverted commas. Now, because I'm trying to listen to the news as a separate sentence, I'm going to put a full stop, and then I'm going to put the inverted commas. And if it wasn't already a capital, this word here would need to begin with a capital letter, and then I would need my inverted commas at the end. And I'm going to jump to the very bottom one, because the bottom one, we've got a very, very similar sentence, except this time, sit down, screamed Dad, and be quiet. And what we need to look here, it's Dad again that is screaming. So that is my reporting clause. But this time, because we have the conjunction, we have the and, sit down and be quiet, it is all one sentence. So this is going to be punctuated slightly differently. So I'm going to have my inverted commas at the beginning, and I'm going to have my capital S for sit down, okay? Then I'm not going to have the exclamation mark after sit down. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put a comma and inverted commas, and the and, it's not going to have a capital letter. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a comma after Dad, and then we're going to have our inverted commas before and he is saying it all as one sentence. So sit down and be quiet. He's saying it as one sentence, and we're having the inverted commas after that exclamation mark at the end, okay? So the second sentence and the final sentence, they're quite similar, but the bottom sentence is your compound sentence. The top sentence is two separate sentences, okay? Now, the sentence that we haven't looked at if you finish your homework, Mum explained, we can go to the museum, I can see that it is Mum that's speaking. And I've not got Mum said, I've got Mum explained. So this bit here in the middle is the reporting clause. It's showing that Mum is speaking. Now, if you finish your homework, I know that the if is a subordinating conjunction. So this part here is a subordinate clause. And that means that it doesn't make sense on its own. So it must be connected to, we can go to the museum, which means that if you finish your homework, we can go to the museum is one complete sentence. So we need to punctuate it so that we have got the inverted commas at the beginning, and I need a capital I for if. So if you finish your homework, because that is mid-sentence, I'm having a comma, and then I'm having the inverted commas, and then Mum explained, comma, and the we, because it is part of the sentence, it doesn't need to be capitalized. And then inverted commas, we can go to the museum, and the inverted commas at the end. And I will save that just so that you've got the examples there. So those of you that have watched on YouTube, I hope that you have found this really helpful, and I hope that you continue to watch the other videos that I produce.